For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Saned Lamini, researcher and analyst. Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
There is some contestation within the ANC Women's League over the election of a new president, which seems to be tied to putting forward a name of a candidate for the ANC as well as the presidency. What is your view on that?
Yeah, I think at the last election, the president of the Women's League, Angie Motshekga, said they were not ready for women's president. And now you've got some people like Batabile Dlamini saying when they said they wanted 50% representation, they didn't mean 50% except for the president, and it's time for a women's president. Now, I have no problem, or I think it's a good thing, to increase representation of women, to have a compulsory quota, because unless you have a compulsory quota, you don't force people to empower women to learn on the job and things like that. But it doesn't seem that this is motivated by feminist concerns or concerns to advance the emancipation of women. From the reports, it appears that those people who are advancing names of women like Nkosazana, Dlamini Zuma, and Balega Mbete are doing that not out of a feminist concern, but for one or other reason, which I don't know what the reason is. They want to block Cyril Ramaphosa. So we come to a problem that we have in general with the advancement of gender rights in South Africa, women's rights in particular, that from 1990, the Women's League has in general not been a feminist organization. Ma Sisulu and Ma Shope were advancing women's rights as far as according to their own vision of what that entailed. But from the period of Winnie Madikizela Mandela being leader of the Women's League, it's not really been a body that has advanced a clear conception of what it means to empower women. Because if you put a woman in a position, are you actually creating conditions where that person can succeed? We saw last year how in the Judicial Services Commission they refused permission of for a female judge to move away from the Mthatha court to the Bishop court to be nearer to her children, for whom she had special responsibilities at that time. They said that sufficient cause wasn't shown, and there was not adequate appreciation on the side of the Judicial Services Commission of the conditions under which women enter the job market or the professional terrain, where they still retain responsibility for child bearing and child rearing, even though the Constitution and the ANC claim to be committed to gender equality. So we've got to ask ourselves, even if it were not tied to this question of blocking Cyril Ramaphosa, I don't know, that's what the newspapers say, is it part of an overall program? And the problem that we have is that in 1990, a lot of women's organizations that had existed in the 1980s dissolved themselves to make way for the ANC Women's League, part of a broader trend where organizations saw themselves as being sort of curtain raisers before the main team came on the field. Now, the ANC Women's League is not really advancing a women's agenda, and we've seen the Women's Ministry is not really advancing a feminist agenda. They last year advanced this idea of men being protectors of women, which is, in a sense, to infantilize them. And I think the time has come, and I think there are already some women's organizations, but more specialized ones around rape and other things. But we need, as part of an overall broad democratizing vision, to rebuild organizations around gender equality, around sexual orientation. There are some organizations, but they need to get more weight in terms of the bodies of numbers that support them. So this thing of having a woman as president, it's basically, it's a good thing, but one needs to ask why, and what is the reason? What is the program that the particular woman will follow? It may well be that when Jacob Zuma leaves the state presidency, he remains ANC president, and that the idea is to have someone as president of the women's, president of the country, who will carry out what he wants, who will defend him from potential prosecution, things like that. That may have been why Thabo Mbeki was going for a third term as ANC president, in order to ensure that whoever succeeded him as president of the country would be one of his proteges. And I think this may be one of the dangers, that these people don't want Cyril Ramaphosa, because it may be completely untrue that he will deviate substantially from what's going on today. We don't know, but that's what is reported.
And now, this issue of gender also arose at the COSATU conference. Do you think it was a good thing that women delegates and possibly others attacked Zwelinzima Vavi for sleeping with a woman at the COSATU headquarters?
Well, you know, the way that it was done did not seem to me to raise the reasons why one should have found it to have been problematic. One of them is reported to have said, if he wanted to sleep with someone, why didn't he take her to a cheap hotel? In other words, the problem in her eyes was that he did it in the office. Whereas to me, the question really is, this person was brought into the organization by Vavi, and it appears he may have bypassed some procedures for employment. He was the primary employer, so that the relationship was an unequal relationship. If an overture is made to you by your boss, you have in your mind that if you don't succumb to that overture, it will have consequences for your future employment. So the problem with the sexual relationship is not primarily that it happened in the office, but that it was an exercise of patriarchal power in the workplace, insofar as the General Secretary propositioned a much more junior person. And I think we need to understand this, and understand also that apologies made to the nation by Vavi and so forth don't really cover the issue. And apologies to his wife doesn't cover the issue only, especially when he made remarks in Xhosa about this woman, which I think were very demeaning. And I think we've got to understand what it is that was wrong with that, and understand, not only for COSATU, but for the universities and a number of other places, that someone who is in a hierarchically higher position, who propositions someone, actually carries patriarchal power behind them.
Thank you, Professor. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about empowering women in public life.